Right. Well, welcome everybody, and thank you for your patience for waiting. Today, I have messed up the time. So, this really shows how we are creatures of habit because I have been doing this show now for since LinkedIn gave me LinkedIn Audio, which is probably like at least 6 months.
That's
Because I was in the
amazing.
Meta group, and I've been doing them at this one very specific time, and all of a sudden, for some odd reason, I put you at a different time. But in my head, it was this time. So I keep telling you
Yeah.
the other time, but in my head and in my calendar, I put it at the usual time.
I think that was the other
I think that was the
week
other
that I had
week
another event
that
going
I
on
had
at the
event
same
going on
time.
at the same time.
Exactly. So it's just you're just such a great person, Junaid, to like roll with it. And I think it's because
Thanks.
when you guys meet him, you'll know that he's just like such an easygoing guy that you want to know. So go follow him before we even get started because he's got a lot of great stuff he's going to share with us today. But he's definitely somebody that all of you guys want to know. Um, so Junaid runs a wonderful podcast called Hacks and Hobbies. That all of you guys want to know. Oh, okie dokie. I went over to your website and it cut me off. Hold on.
No problem.
No problem.
So hacks and hobbies, and so Junaid, you've got a lot of stuff going on. So you've got your podcast. Um, you've you've got you've got like you're making movies now and doing all kinds of stuff with visio audio is what I would call it.
Hmm.
Um, and most recently, you have been developing home studios and
That's
teaching
right.
people how to do that. And I believe, don't you even have something going on Amazon, or am I mistaken?
Yes, so I'm
So
also an
I'm also
Amazon
an Amazon
influencer, so I can
influencer, so I can
live stream
live
on
stream on
Amazon
Amazon.
That's
and talk to
awesome.
people
Talk to
about the
people about
products
the
they need
products they
for
need
their home
for their
studios.
home studios.
Super. So guys, there's going to be some echo because we're on audio and we're on live stream,
We're on two
and I
separate
don't know
platforms, so there's going to be an overlap for sure.
Sure.
exactly. So I wish that we could figure it out. Maybe LinkedIn will help us someday with that, but but for the moment we're going to make do. But I like doing this because a lot of people have told me with the audio events that they're disappointed that there's no replay, so we
Hmm.
can't really do a replay when there's just an audio event. And so I decided to start recording these. That way we have the best of both worlds. We have people who just wanted to pop in and listen to you, and other people who can't make it can still watch the replay later, right?
Absolutely.
So Janae, tell us. So Amazon influencer. Wow, wow, wow. Uh, I thought I'd seen that, but I haven't spoken to you in a while. So this is
Hmm.
great to get an update about what you're doing. Um, so I think today I wanted to invite you because a lot of people are understanding the power of podcasting, but have no idea where to get started. And I tend to lump together live stream and podcast because for me, this is a podcast. Um, so, what does it actually mean? Podcast, we think of audio, but in my mind, as a marketer, I'm thinking about putting it out on so many platforms, cutting it up and making marketing videos, transcribing it, turning it into a blog post,
Hmm.
um, using it in all different ways. So I tend to lump video and audio together and into kind of one two for one strategy is how I'll call it, right?
Sure. To
Um,
save time.
exactly, but it's becoming interesting to more and more normal people who wouldn't normally consider it because of the massive growth we've seen. I think Clubhouse really convinced us that there was a whole market for audio that we didn't even know existed. And then Twitter and LinkedIn quickly jumped on board.
Yeah.
And I've also been following a lot of case studies about podcasters who have off the charts conversion rates. And what I mean by conversion, guys, is if you are thinking about wanting to become an influencer and become known for anything nowadays, you should consider a podcast because your audience will follow you and they're much more loyal for some reason than other domains. So if you were an author or you were a blogger, it seems like the podcast crowd is just got this incredible double loyalty to you. Um, so there's just so many benefits of considering starting your own podcast. But the big problem is, how do you do that? How do you get started? And I think that one of the big barriers to entry is really knowing the equipment you need, um, and thinking that you need to invest thousands of dollars and maybe, I don't know, rent a studio. I've actually had people tell me, I don't have that kind of money to like rent a studio. How frequently can I afford that? And so you're here to tell people that no, you can actually do this from home. There's a way to do it from home. And so we'd love to hear more about this.
Absolutely. So you can start podcasting from your car. You don't need any equipment. All you need is your smartphone, which has the capability to do everything in that you can imagine. I mean, that's how I started my podcast, Hacks and Hobbies. I jumped in the car, I discovered this app called Anchor.fm. I was like, holy smokes, of course, if I can record video on my smartphone and upload it to YouTube, why can I not record audio? I mean, it was mind blowing. It wasn't until a company like Anchor enabled it for us to do that. So that's where I started. And of course, with the pandemic and the introduction to Clubhouse application, everybody was spending time on their phones. In fact, they had to get multiple pairs of headset because the battery on their AirPods would run out. I'm like, okay, hold on, guys, let me switch my headphones because the battery's running out, and they're hanging out because you're spending so many hours listening to the content. Now, podcasting, the reason why people stick and listen to more podcasts is because it is a passive activity. What do I mean by that? When I'm recording a conversation, when I'm having a conversation with Krista, who is also a guest on my podcast, by the way, um, once we've done recording it, it is now available for anybody to listen to it on the go. They're going for a run, they're in their car, they're on an airplane. You can download it. I mean, podcasting has been the audio on demand or radio on demand before video on demand was even popularized. So if you think about that, that is huge number of time that people get to spend with you. And that's where the loyalty comes from. Pat Flynn, what he spoke at Social Media Marketing World, he said people spend 45 minutes to 30 to 45 minutes listening to a podcast as opposed to spending 5 minutes, 3 minutes watching a video. And with TikTok videos and all these videos, people are spending even less number of time. So that's where podcast stands alone into building a really solid platform for yourself. Seth Godin had even written an article where he said podcast guesting is like the new um, guest blogging, because back in the days you could literally talk to people and be like, hey, Krista, I have got this topic I want to talk about, can I post it on your blog? And they would then come and blog on your post. And if you think about it, it's all about content. The more content there is about you and about your expertise, guess what's happening? People are spending and listening to more time. And I was just told I have an audio echo, of course. Let's see if I can eliminate that. All right. So that's where it comes down to the power of podcasting. So how do you get started? Is that the question I'm answering?
Well, yeah. I mean, people, you said you started in
How
your
to start with
car.
podcasting. My
Love it.
podcast initially started as a audio only product, but with the introduction of video, and for the past 2 years that we've been sitting at home, more and more people are doing videos with their podcast. They're doing live streaming, like Krista is doing live streaming. And when you introduce the video and audio, that's where you need to say, oh, you need a place to not only present the audio but also your video. And that's where I started solving my own problem by building my own home studio. But I didn't build a studio just for the podcasting. It was more than just for podcasting. It was more for building confidence, building the authority, and showing people that, hey, I know what I'm talking about. I've done it. I've gone through the, what do we call it? I've gone through the journey, and this is how you can too. So where do you start with building your home studio? Well, number one thing that you want to focus on is you want to focus on lighting. If you can figure out where the lights are coming to your room, then if you actually jump over to the YouTube stream, you can see what we're talking about. When you figure out where the light is coming from in your room, so analyzing your room, where are your doors, where are your windows, figure out the openings in your room, so that way you can then put the camera opposite to them, because you want the light to shine on you, shine on the talent, as opposed to looking back into the camera lens. And just like we don't like to look at the sun, we put on sunglasses and whatnot. um, Cameras don't like to look at bright lights either. So that's the first thing you want to focus on. Number two, this is a podcast, so you want to make sure that you get a really good microphone that's going to capture your essence. And if the audio is not comforting to your ear, guess what? You're going to walk away. When somebody is leaving you a voicemail and you can't hear properly, guess what you're going to do? You're just going to delete that message and be like, hey, and probably send them a text message. I couldn't understand what you were saying. Can you repeat that? So audio is more important than anything in your video. So focus on audio, get a really good microphone so that you're coming up. I've got my daughter coming here with the mail. She's my mailman today, so she already wants to open the packages. Um, so those are two main things: lighting and audio. Now, the cool part about some of the microphones that we have available, you can use these USB microphones on your smartphone as well. So how I started was I jumped in my car. I started recording in an app called Anchor.fm that has the ability to record conversations. And what's cool is that now that Clubhouse lets you record conversations in your rooms, you can repurpose that content from there for a podcast as well. The really cool part, that the hard part in podcasting is the distribution. How to set up the distribution. Hey, I want my podcast to be on Apple Podcast. I want it to be on Google Podcast. I want it to be on uh, all of these platforms: Stitcher, Amazon Music, and Anchor FM makes that process really easy, because they're like, okay, go ahead, create your podcast, record your trailer, and we will automatically start publishing it to all of the places that we have plans with.
I
Does that
love
make
that. So,
sense to my audience? Because I love to answer questions
yes,
and
raise your hands,
give some
people.
more depth as we go. How about you,
We've
Krista? You
got a
got any
thumbs up.
questions?
So, I want to
Krista, are
know.
you on mute? Hold on.
Oh,
Sorry, there we go.
no worries. I know with the double sound, it's not easy, but I just want to make sure we have everything possible here. So I want to know what, when you went to Anchor, was that the first one you tried? I mean, because there's so many out there. Sometimes I feel like maybe FOMO. Like I have one provider and then I'm thinking, "Oh, is there something better out there?" Like, have you done your research and compared the other platforms to understand, are they pretty much all the same and you just have a personal preference, or, you know, is there honestly a benefit to one over the other?
So since Anchor came out, there has been more. There have been newer platforms. There's Podbean. Um, I can't remember. Spreaker. There's way too many platforms. The reason I stuck with uh, Anchor is because it was really simple, and they did all the heavy lifting for me. Now there are newer platforms that will say, "Hey, we will give you dynamic ad placement in your podcast episode. We'll enable all of these other features. We'll promote your podcast." So that's what you got to look at, and it all comes down to, hey, how much are you willing to spend or put down for hosting your podcast? Because marketing is where it really comes down to bringing the audience back to your podcast. Marketing. So from
That's
that
a great
perspective,
answer.
hmm
What about marketing? So you've mentioned again, distribution, getting it on as many channels as possible. Um, Before we head into like marketing strategies for your podcast, I definitely want to ask about, right now, there's only a certain number of channels that will accept podcasts easily. So there's certain ones that are restricted, like you have to go through an extra application process, right? Like
hmm
the ones I know right now are HubSpot. You have to go, um, now, let me think. HubSpot, I know for sure you have to apply. And LinkedIn recently announced that they have podcasts as well. So there's definitely, it seems like everybody soon is going to have a podcast platform on their own.
right. So what
Um,
they're doing is they're creating curated podcast networks to focus on really specific conversations, specific people. Now it gives them two different what do we call it? Two different advantages. Number one, they said, "Hey, we have top of the top uh, podcast on our network. How would you like to be part of this network? Because they they promote that you're automatically going to get the number of downloads that other podcasts are getting. How much truth is to it? I have no idea. It all comes down to, hey, why am I part of three different networks? I'm part of LinkedIn. I'm part of, you know, on Facebook. I'm part of Instagram, because each network brings different audience, different age group of audience to introduce to you. Um, so those networks are on top of all the other distribution platforms that are available. So being able to distribute your podcast to everywhere versus you're like, hey, I'm only going to produce very curated content, and I'm going to have a fee associated to my podcast. So only people who pay can listen to my podcast. That's where these networks come into play. And if you notice, just like we have on YouTube, or we have Patreon, where people pay a certain amount to get access to exclusive content. Apple Podcasts enabled that feature last year, where you can now have subscription based on your own podcast. So then you can have extra content available for your subscribers.
um, so one thing I've noticed is a tendency now to monetize on all forms of content.
Mm-hmm.
So everyone seems to be thinking of ways how to use really great content to build an audience, and then how to start monetizing by putting a portion behind a paywall. And I'm actually going to be hosting an event about this,
Mm.
monetizing, how to monetize your content. Because as a business coach, I've been studying this and I find it really fascinating. And I find that more and more people are actually willing to pay for good content. And this is a new thing, completely new, right? I mean, think about it. Let me think. I have some paid audio files that I'm getting. So I'm in a meditation group, and it's a paid annual membership to be a member. And part of the membership includes access to a private podcast. And each week, or I think it's each week, I get one email and it's like, happy Sunday. This is your coach. Here's the audio file for the week. And this is only for the members. So the same things with other forms of content, which we're not going to talk about today because we're talking about podcasting, but I just see this general trend more and more. Why do you think that is though, Junaid? Do you have any, like, you've been in this market a long time, and I know you're very well informed. So why do you think people would suddenly be wanting or willing to pay more for content?
Well, here's the thing, right? Um, there's new people entering this space. Like literally every day, there's new entrepreneurs, there's new startups, there's new people entering this workforce of internet media. Because if you think about it, there's new people graduating from school and entering this new workforce, this new internet economy, this new area. So they want access to information as fast as they can, and they're willing to pay, especially if they don't have uh, pre-existing expenses. For example, paying for a car. For example, paying for other things. They're already in with the gig economy, right? They're like, hey, I'm gonna DoorDash, I'm gonna Uber Eat, I'm gonna use Uber to travel. I'm okay in paying these subscription fees. So why not pay to get knowledge instead of spending the time? So it all comes down to, hey, do I want to climb the 50 floors or do I want to take the elevator? So that's why they're willing to spend the energy to go up faster.
Interesting enough, around that whole idea of making money with content, um, many of my coaches take their free content and put it behind a paywall. And it's not one, but multiple. So I've had a couple of coaches do that. And I'm gonna let Gabe come up here. But when I asked them, how are you able to have something free and then also be charging for it, the answer ties back into what you had mentioned about taking the elevator. So
Yeah.
when I noticed this trend, and it wasn't just one coach, it was a few coaches, and these are reputable coaches. I mean, legit coaches. And I said, they answered similarly. They said to me, the reason we're able to do that is because if you just would binge listen to our entire podcast, which these people have been around for a while, so we're talking years of content,
Yeah.
you know, how long would that take you before you found what you're looking for? Whereas if you come and you buy the course, you're going to find audio files in there or video that you would find if you dig deep into my podcast or my show. But these people are willing to pay for it because I've curated it, I've sorted it, I've organized it, and I've said start here. And so it's really interesting.
Yeah.
And what I'm fascinated about is that you can do both. So instead of making two unique pieces of content, we could take all the history. And I'm seeing this not only with audio, but people producing books out of blogs. Like they
Yeah.
blogged for 2 years, and then suddenly they're like, all I did was take the blog articles, reorganize them into chapters, and
Yeah.
put out a book. So I think we're going to see the same thing with audio, where it's going to be like audio collections, and this is going to be like the show collection, and people will pay for it just like we maybe earlier would have paid for cable TV or Netflix. And I think companies like Netflix are getting worried because of what you said. People are looking towards shorter for video,
Yeah.
but audio we're willing to do it longer because we can listen to it on the go. You can be working out, you can be cooking, you can be in your car. Whereas video, sitting on a computer all day and then sitting there even longer is definitely not my idea of relaxation. So people
Right.
are just like, no, right?
Yeah, I totally agree. And it all comes down to the intention of each of the course. For example, my course, you do need to sit down and watch so you can actually apply the things that I'm teaching you, right? Because you're physically doing it and you'll only have to go through it one time. But some content, you want to experience it in different ways. Like I will listen to a book in my car and then there's places where it tells me, hey, pause the book here, go write down. So I'll go back and listen to the audio again when I'm able to do that. So it all comes down to what's my intention, what am I trying to do with my time here, and then go next on.
Okay, so on the LinkedIn audio, we have Gabe who came up stage. So want to welcome Gabe and see if he has any questions or anything to add. How you doing?
Hey, everybody, how are you two doing? So I was just kind of wanting to mention about like what you guys were when you were talking about like finding places to host like audio podcasts and stuff like that. And I'm always thinking about like trying to find unconventional ways to put your stuff out there. Like one of the most unique ones that I've seen recently was a few months ago. Ben Curie, who has his own podcast called the Del Guy Podcast, was introducing people how to put their podcast on, of all places, IMDb.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you wouldn't want to just, that's not a location you would go to look for a podcast, but while you're there looking, if they have podcast suggestions, that sort of thing, I think those are the kind of ways to find and put your content out there. When we're always talking about, the early adopters who get the jump on these sort of places, who knows, a year or two, it could be a place to go find podcasts, but excuse me, I'm out by a bus.
No problem. Well, I love that. I love that what you're saying, because it's being an early adopter. We as creators, you're a creator, Junaid and I are creators. I think we're seeing that. We're seeing that the people who are now leading the field are the ones that got in early. So it is a long game, right? You could rise to the top quickly, but honestly, for the majority of people, I think if you're going to go into something like a podcast or any kind of creation, don't expect overnight miracles. On the contrary, take it slow and be more realistic, because podcast burnout is real, where people it's not a fad, guys. It's something that, it's better you take it. You're like, okay, I'm going to try twice a month at the beginning and make sure I can handle it. Then if you're like, okay, I'm going to do a daily podcast, and then after 2 months you're like, no thanks, right?
Yeah.
What do you think about that, Junaid?
Yeah.
And Gabe too.
Well, I'm going to say that's one of the things is to have an end game.
Yes.
Everybody talks about having a exit strategy when you start a business or whatever. Same principle. Like, your podcast and what you create or certain content that you create, I mean, it's going to be finite of your ability to do these things. It's very rare that somebody spends 20 years doing the same podcast or whatever. I mean, I think those are things of a bygone era where we're not going to see that anymore.
Yeah, I think it all comes down to what is your intention for the podcast. And when you can define that intention, define your why before you even start recording, it makes a lot more just creating content. I really like that you brought up the IMDb fact that people are posting their podcast on IMDb, and the reason that happened is because during the pandemic, the actors were not working on active projects, and they needed a way to show that hey, we have been still creating content, we have still been guesting on these podcasts, so we need a way to show this information. So when I discovered that, I was like, okay, let's put on the podcast on my network, and that was pretty fun. Um, being able to create content because I found because there's a lot of people on my podcast that are actually actors and producers. So to be able to link them to their IMDb profiles was a really cool thing to do. Now, it is not going to bring any traffic to your podcast. It is a nice, what do you call it? It's a nice whistle. It's like a bells and whistles more than anything else. The one way, and I don't know, Krista, when you want to switch over to the marketing strategy topic, but the best way to bring any traffic to your podcast, more than social media marketing, more than posting reels and TikTok videos, is guesting on other people's podcasts. Because and to give you a really good example, when our good friend, our good friend, let's say, Matthew McConaughey came out with the book Green Lights, he showed up on 500 shows and podcasts to promote his book. And I don't know how many of you have read the book Green Lights. It's really nice, really good.
I love that. And I actually saw that he was on the podcast of one of my friends on LinkedIn. And, one of that's such good advice because today I've had 3 coaching calls. And that's part of the reason I think I spaced out and got the times wrong because I'm such in my rhythm. Like I'm living and dying by my calendar, right? So I'm like, oh, it's my normal time. And in the 3 coaching calls I had today, there was a common thread. And that was, I was looking for missing links where I said to these different clients with completely different businesses, what could you do that would drive traffic that you're not doing enough of? And ironically, it was exactly partnerships. And I call it partnerships because underneath partnerships, I understand influencer deals, promotions, collaborations, guest blogging, guest podcasting. So for me, partnerships could be so many things. So I wanted to give a more encompassing label because how that ends up being, co-hosting something. Right now, there's also a big trend towards hosting an event and having, like, let's say we're going to do a home studio summit and we're going to invite all of our podcasting friends. And, I have studied extensively the people who've really succeeded in online marketing, including one of our friends, Pat Flynn, right? We're both big fans of. And the truth is, there is one common thing I've noticed is all of them have really understood how to use the traffic of other people. And but it has to be a win-win, because if you want to get in front of someone else's audience, you don't want to take advantage of that. You want to say, this person has an audience already. What can I give them that they're going to say yes? And maybe it's a win-win, like you'll be on my podcast, I'll be on yours. That could be a simple win-win, right? Or it could be you're promoting a book, so the more publicity, the better. So I'll go out of my way to go on as many podcasts as possible because I know right now you're promoting a book, right? But you definitely don't want to just walk around knocking on doors and be like, let me be on your podcast. So I think it's all about not the what, but the how you do it. always make it a win for the other person. Would you agree?
Absolutely. You got to bring value because people are spending time to get value. The reason they're listening to these podcasts is because they want to get value out of it. They want to make sure, hey, what from this conversation can I take away and apply to my business and apply to my podcast and apply to my website and apply to what I'm doing with what I'm passionate about.
I love it. I love it. So, talking about marketing, talking about marketing, it's very hard for podcasting because, like you said, you're basically, it's kind of like putting up a website. I like to compare it because everyone thinks, okay, I'm a business owner. I need to have some kind of a web presence. So I'll have a website. But if you're not driving traffic to your website, you're just, it's like almost like a digital visit, business card. Like, why did you even do it? So podcasting can be the same way. If you don't know how to market it correctly, then your podcast is just going to be one in millions, and it's going to get worse because the competition, more and more people are going to understand the power of podcasting. Like, it's almost like a secret. I'm like, podcasting is too good to be true, but sooner or later the others will come, right? They'll figure it out.
Yeah. But I think there's no shortage of people creating content because if you look at the numbers, there's about 4 billion people on the internet. Of those 4 billion people, there's only 37 million people running YouTube shows. And of those 37 million, probably only 10% or even smaller number has over 10,000 subscribers. So there's a ton of room for growth for every single one of us.
Thank you for encouraging because, as you know, there's always these naysayers who are like, the market's oversaturated. You'll never make it to the top. And with that said, you and I both know that the secret is doing something different, like having a purpose before you get started, knowing your why, having a mission. Like, who are you doing this for? Whatever you're doing, whatever kind of content, a live show, an audio podcast, you want to know, what is my audience interested in? Like, you're on my show because I put out content for people who are trying to monetize online.
Mm.
So my audience are new growing entrepreneurs who are looking to build new income streams. Um, and this is one income stream that we need to talk about much more, is podcasting and figuring it out. So what advice would you have for anybody who is like, okay, I can get the podcast set up, or maybe even hire someone like you to help me do it faster? Like you said, take the elevator.
Yeah.
But then how do I market? How do I market it? What kind of short advice do you have? Because I know we could do another hour about just marketing the thing,
Absolutely.
right?
Well, the first thing you want to do is just start showing up everywhere. And the only way to show up is to stop thinking and start doing. Because half the time we spend thinking, we are our own gatekeepers from putting out content. So if you're passionate about something, if you want to start a podcast, just start posting it um, on post it on the three different networks that you're part of and start looking at the analytics because just because you're posting it daily does not mean that that's the type of content people are looking for. There's also a ton of tools available that'll show you what type of content are people looking for. For example, my good friend Heather Parody, they launched new NFT for newbies last year. They got to 1 million downloads within 9 months, within 8 or 9 months, right? NFT is a really hot topic right now. Gary Vaynerchuk's talking about it. There's a ton of people talking about NFTs. Newbies, all of us are newbies in that space. So look at what's really trending in the market. Right now, Elon Musk buying Twitter or backing out of buying Twitter is what's trending. But look at the overall what's the conversation that you're really passionate about? What are other things that are you're passionate about, and how do they all link back to who you are, what services you offer? Because it all comes down to what is your end game? Like Gabe mentioned earlier, what's the end game? What do you want out of it? If it's a way for you to connect with new people, listen to their stories, see that, find nuggets in their conversations, then boom, do that, because you're not doing it for nothing. You're building your own muscle. You're putting in the reps. You're getting better at interviewing. You're getting better at answering questions in your own space. So I think that's I kind of went on a couple of tangents, but yeah.
Well, no, I love it, because even though that's not directly like a whole marketing strategy at the end, I think that people don't understand that podcasting, you're getting a marketing tool, you're getting a public speaking tool, you're getting a tech tool, because suddenly you know how to use more tech, and that positions you in someone of knowledge who will, a go-to. You're creating your own media platform, which I can't possibly overemphasize how amazing that is in itself, right? That's possible today. I can't, it blows my mind. It blows my mind. But also, I have to put this out there for anyone else listening. As a business coach, this is a sales tool. And when I say sales tool, obviously a podcast in itself is one of my nurture tools. Tomorrow I'll do a workshop called Nurture Your Leads. And so podcasting is on the list. It's because long-term you're going to build loyalty. People can come back and listen. After a couple of episodes, they'll probably think, hey, I know you a lot better, even though we've never met. That's the power of podcasting that you can't really get from a lot of other places. But when I say it's a sales tool, it leads back to what you said a minute ago, is know the end game. So if you want to use podcasting to get to know the people on your show, have interesting conversations with interesting people, what you can do is make a list of your dream clients and say, I would love to work with the CEOs of software as a service companies, SaaS companies. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to reach out to as many as possible, and I'm going to pitch them my podcast, saying how cool, I have this podcast and I would love to interview you. And if you do it in the right way, at the right time, like maybe they're trying to publish a book, or they're doing some big launch for their company, they're about to release it. If you know those things, you can really convince them. Yeah. Then overnight, literally, you're going to have a double whammy. You're going to have everyone who looks up the name of that CEO potentially landing on your podcast. That's number one. So you're driving traffic towards you. So it's a marketing tool. And number two, after someone's been on your podcast, they're no longer a stranger. Mm-hmm. And that's what I wanted to mention about sales is if you pick your guests wisely, they become friends, they become collaborators, they become partners, and maybe even clients, right? So if you don't know who it is, just pick a bunch of clients, potential clients, and be like, these are my dream clients, so let me interview them. Because then I can stay in touch with them. And if things align, maybe we can even work together.
100%.
On top of that,
yeah.
Also, like you said, be friends, but then at that point, being connected with them, there's also a lot of the little ancillary benefits that come along. So like to say, hey, my friend Krista, she does a podcast. You would be great on there. Just by getting feedback and recommendations like that without you even having to really try at that point. It's like you using that vehicle for every single ounce that you possibly can.
That's so true. And I was listening to Russell Brunson talk about the Dream 100, which is it's a classic. It's in his book. I think one of his books, Expert Secrets or something. And he was talking about how important it is to identify the people that you want to align yourself with to become closer to them in terms of how people see them. If you want to gain influence, like let's say you're a life coach. So who would your audience really put on a pedestal? It might be somebody like Tony Robbins. So how can you get closer to them feeling that way about you? Well, one of the ways is somehow to find a common link between you and Tony Robbins, get on a stage with the guy. And you guys see this all the time in marketing when you'll see people taking selfies with Gary Vee. I mean, I don't know how many hours you have to stand in line or how much it costs or whatever, but then they'll keep that on their profile forever, right?
Yep.
Because people, you know, you are the sum of the 5 people who you associate with most or who are closest to you. And so with that in mind, podcasting is a way to get close to people who you want to get close to. Now, the question is are those the people who your audience are going to come for or not? Because I do see people who are putting out great podcasts who never, ever have any following. But they put them out like clockwork, right? And they're interviewing all these people that nobody knows. And they're having really long discussions with these people, and you can tell they're really enjoying it. Like and if you take the time to listen, there's some really cool discussions. But sometimes I almost wonder like how different the goals are here, right? Of the podcast. It's like,
I think you're answering your own question, because if you think about it, if they're using it as a sales tool, if they're using it as a building relationship tool, it might only need 2 or 3 listens from other people, but all that matters is the conversation the two of them are having and what business opportunities they're going to build up after that.
It makes sense because I don't remember which famous person said this, but a famous salesperson, maybe it was Brian Tracy, said people love to talk about themselves. So if you really want to close a deal or make a sale, you really have to figure out how to put a person in a position where you're asking questions and suddenly they're just doing all the talking, right?
Yep.
So there you go, podcasting. Perfect example.
Absolutely.
So any last words of advice, Junaid, for people who are maybe not so convinced, a little skeptical about this whole podcast thing?
Well, it all comes down to what are their aspirations? What are they trying to get out of it? And if they're feeling that, okay, I really want to start a podcast, but I don't know how to, or I don't know what topic to talk about, well, start listing out topics that you love to talk about. Just do some homework, because the better that you do that homework now than later in life, right? Because you're so sick of what you're doing with a podcast. You're like, I don't even know why I started this podcast. But if you start that from the beginning, like, okay, why do I want to do this? Well, I want to be known as an expert in this space. I want to be known as somebody who's building really cool things. So, yeah, do a little homework for yourself. Write down what it is that you like to talk about, and then start finding people who might be your ideal clients, and start thinking of, okay, how can I talk to them? Who's my connection to them? Look at LinkedIn, right? It'll tell you how many connections away you are from your ideal client, from your ideal person that you want to build a relationship with. The rest the rest will follow.
That's great advice. And what do you think about solo versus guest? Because I kind of do both. So I have a solo episode on Thursdays, and then I have a guest on Mondays.
Yeah.
do you think I have the best of both worlds, or have you seen podcasts that succeed with just one person?
I have seen podcasts that succeed with just one person, and it all comes down to the content type, right? So if it's a story-based podcast, if it's a documentary-based podcast, you're teaching somebody something, then it's a solo podcast, and your ideal the reason you put that content out is that it is an evergreen content that people are going to listen to, come back and become your customer, come back and become your client, come back and become your friend. So think about that outcome, and then who's listening to your podcast? Are these solo episodes going to be teaching moments for your coach, for your clients, for your people that you're coaching to? Then yes, then you want to put out that content. Bringing in experts and guests is a way to then expand your network and introduce your people to even more people. That makes sense.
I love it. Thank you so much. So tell us in the end now, where can people reach you, and what kind of services could they potentially approach you for?
All right, so I'm available and accessible over here on LinkedIn, on YouTube. You can look up Super Junaid on any platform. There's a superjunaid.com website as well. I have a blog out there. And the content services that I offer is I help people set up their studios, their podcasts, their website, essentially build digital presence so that they can show up and create content to move their business forward.
I love it. Thank you so much for coming, and sorry again about all the scheduling.
No worries at all.
No worries. I'm gonna send you a connection request, sir.
Gabe is a great guy. He's in the audience or on stage still.
Yeah.
Yes, please do. You're gonna love Junaid.
Oh,
I'll connect.
Gabe is a really good friend of mine. King of Live Stream. He actually hooked me up and helped me connect with at least 20 different shows when I was doing my home studio rehab show challenge in February. So Gabe's a really good friend of mine. He's awesome.
Oh, so he's just messing with me. Maybe you can ask him for an autograph, huh?
I will. I'll ask him for an autograph. And for those, just a side note, he's a beekeeper and he does do honey. So
we're going to have to do a whole nother podcast about that one.
Yeah. And I want to shout out to Alice Bowles. She's been in the LinkedIn audio room listening in. She's part of my mastermind through SBI Pro. Thank you, Alice, for jumping in.
Love it. Love it. So, and that's the last thing is, besides being you're a multi-talented guy, besides offering all those services to help people create their digital presence online so that they can grow their businesses, you're also mentoring people. So, and that is something right now, is that only available within, if you're a member of the community from Pat Flynn? So
yeah, so that's Pat Flynn has an amazing community over SBI Pro where other entrepreneurs like yourself and myself come together so they can find common ground. Other people that are also going through the same. So we have specific groups that we hang out with on a weekly basis and do our check-ins and accountability and whatnot. So it's really awesome.
Love it. I love it. And see how everything comes together in the end, right? This is a beautiful example. We're on LinkedIn audio, and despite the echo, I think people could hear us okay. At least the transcription picked up. We're on YouTube and we're on LinkedIn Live. So, and we're across the world from each other. So this is just amazing how mind-blowing it is what we can do to get our voice out there. So to end this, I just want to tell everyone that you have an important message to share with this world. Every one of you has something important to say at every age, in every circumstance. Never think that you're not worthy or that you don't deserve the microphone. So even if you're introverted, even if you're you don't have much maybe education or professional experience, every one of you has something important that can help someone else or an important message to share. Sometimes it's just enough to show up and let people know that it's okay not to be perfect, not to have a great day or something. So don't think that you have to wait to read 1,000 books before you start your podcast so that you're super smart, so that you have this amazing like textbook podcast. All right. I wanted to make sure people know that, because some people think that that's what podcasting's about. And in general, it's just about using your voice to connect with others.
Absolutely.
Thank you everybody for coming and for sticking around. And we're going to put this up on YouTube so that hopefully there'll be a couple of you who will come and watch this replay. So thanks again, Junaid, for being here. I'm going to end the LinkedIn audio room. You guys have been amazing. And for those who don't know, I go live here every Monday. And if I can keep my time straight, it's from 3 to 4 p.m. EDT, so East Coast time. And I'm doing an audio room, LinkedIn Live, and a YouTube on Mondays with guests. So I've got amazing guests, mostly people who would be interested in entrepreneurship or growing online marketing, growing their brand. And then on Thursdays, I have a 30-minute short show with a specific tutorial. So every week I try to give a tutorial that could help entrepreneurs. Last week it was how to get a customer testimonial. And this week it's going to be how to do a discovery call properly. So always looking for interesting ideas and themes to help entrepreneurs. Big round of applause to you, Junaid, and hopefully we'll see you again on the show.
Thank you so much.
So let me end the audio show and see you guys next week.
Bye.
And let me end the broadcast. See you guys over on YouTube. Bye-bye.